This is the Fujian, China's answer to the newest U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford. However, you might notice these two aircraft carriers look eerily similar, since China has a history of copying U.S. equipment from aircraft like the MV-22 Osprey and the F-35 fighter to Stinger missiles and everything else in between. China has tried to rip off the U.S. in every way possible. And though China tried its best to copy the Ford in every way it could, there is one major difference that's a game-changer if a war were to ever break out between the two countries. While China may have tried to rip off the USS Gerald R. Ford, it simply cannot do so because the US has perfected the art of making aircraft carriers for over 100 years. For the US Navy, the USS Langley was the first aircraft carrier that entered service in 1922. Initially comprised of a short wooden deck for biplanes to take off and land, the US Navy soon realized the strategic significance of such a weapon system. Due to the inherent limitations in naval combat based on ship speed, fuel, and other variables, mobile air bases at sea have numerous tactical advantages that solved issues the US encountered during World War I. For example, sending aircraft ahead of a surface force can warn ships far beyond the line of sight of approaching enemy forces. Later, the US Navy experimented and helped perfect the art of using naval aviation to attack enemy ships and submarines. Due to the seemingly limitless possibilities of naval aviation, the US stopped converting ships into aircraft carriers and began building them purposefully before World War II. In addition to this, the US solved the problems of getting heavily loaded aircraft off deck with fuel and ordnance by creating the steam catapult system. The main purpose of the steam catapult is to launch aircraft off deck by helping generate some of the lift necessary to get them airborne. While a British invention, the US perfected its use on carriers by adjusting the pressures needed to get the steam just right, playing with wind speeds and directions to help generate lift, and getting the timing of air operations down. All in all, these efforts allowed the US Navy to get more heavily armed aircraft off deck faster and safer than using a plane's own propulsion to get airborne. During World War II, the US became the premier world superpower for naval aviation and has retained that title to this day. But in recent years, China has sought to usurp this title. China did not even think about aircraft carriers until the 1990s when it purchased a defunct ex-Soviet carrier from Ukraine. After more than a decade of retrofitting and testing, the Chinese Navy commissioned its first carrier in 2012. While essentially just finishing the construction of a Soviet carrier, this was an important first step for China, as they had never owned or operated an aircraft carrier before. After this historic first step, China produced its own aircraft carrier a few years later. However, this carrier, with only 24 outdated planes, 40-year-old engineering systems, and 60-year-old weapons, cannot match the more than 70 modern aircraft and 21st-century equipment and weapons an aircraft carrier like the Ford can carry. It was not until the Chinese publicly announced the existence of the Fujian in 2018 that the US began to worry about Chinese naval power. But luckily for you, you don't have to invest billions of dollars to combat Chinese naval aggression, since you can do that from the comfort of your own home for free while playing War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat video game ever made, incorporating ships, planes, tanks, and other types of equipment in massive, epic battles. It is free to download on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. With the ability to command over 2,500 combat vehicles across 10 major factions, you can accumulate hangars and garages full of vehicles that incorporate the best of historic and modern-day equipment to suit your needs and play style. Thanks to a huge team of highly dedicated devs and researchers, our favorite part is that each vehicle in the game is meticulously built so that its individual components like tracks, engines, and armor have realistic destruction physics, markings, and camouflage. Join a worldwide community of over 70 million players to get yourself immersed in one of the best military simulator games around. But don't wait too long to download on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. For a limited time, new and returning players who have not been on in 6 months can receive a massive bonus pack that includes the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of free premium access, among other rewards. Download this totally free game in the pinned comment below to claim your reward and start playing today. Now, back to the Fujian. Commissioned in 2022 and with sea trials underway in May of this year, the Fujian is expected to enter the active fleet any day now. But how does it compare to the best aircraft carrier the US has ever produced, the Gerald R. Ford? Both the Gerald R. Ford and the Fujian represent the pinnacle of naval combat power for the US and China, respectively. However, it is hard to tell them apart at first glance. The Ford's deck is 333 meters long and 78 meters wide, just slightly larger than the Fujian, which is 316 meters long and 76 meters wide. While these numbers are almost identical, several technological innovations will greatly increase the cyclic flight operations on one versus the other, but more on that later. As far as weight, the Ford really outclasses the Fujian to the tune of almost 20,000 more tons, since the Ford comes in at 100,000 tons and the Fujian at roughly 88,000 tons with a full combat load of planes, supplies, fuel, and bombs. Why the weight matters so much is because, with the Ford being heavier, she will sit lower in the water. By sitting lower, she will naturally have a lower center of gravity than the Fujian, enabling the Ford to more aggressively and heel over more than her counterpart. But there are a few more slight differences with bigger consequences. On the Ford, she comes equipped with a wide array of weapons meant to defend herself from all types of attacks. From forward to aft, the Ford has a self-defense system comprised of 2 elevated Sea Sparrow launchers and 2 rolling airframe missile launchers, both for point defense against incoming missile threats. The Ford also has 3 close-in weapon system, CIWS, 20mm chain guns that can shred incoming missiles with thousands of rounds per minute. For surface targets like small inflatable attack craft or fast attack boats, the Ford has 25mm Bushmaster chain guns and 4.50 caliber machine gun mounts. However, the Ford can also put the CIWS into surface mode and engage small boats. And that's not all she's armed with. In addition to these kinetic systems, the Ford comes prepared with the Navy's most advanced electronic warfare suite, the SLQ-32V-E6. This electronic warfare array combines both active and passive measures to collect, interpret, target, and destroy incoming missiles, surface, and air threats via radar and other electromagnetic transmissions. The Ford also has chaff and flare launchers that deploy various types of dummy rounds meant to fool incoming missiles, and even a towed array called a Nixie, meant to confuse incoming torpedoes.